Support for the Leadoff on WGLT and WGLT.org comes from the Central Illinois Regional Airport, where Florida beaches are one flight away. Featuring nonstop service on Allegiant Airlines to Tampa, St. Pete, and Orlando Sanford from Bloomington. Close, convenient, CIRA. More at CIRA.com.
Unit 5 School Board takes a first step toward a potential ban on cell phones in school. That's one of the things you need to know to start your day for Thursday, July 25th. I'm Ryan Denham, and this is WGLT's The Leadoff. Now let's lead off with the Unit 5 School Board, asking the administration to consider that ban on cell phones in district schools. WGLT's Charlie Schlenker has more.
This potential major policy change surfaced during a brief remark from School Board President Jeremy DeHaye during last week's meeting.
What we would like to do is sometime in the next couple of months, if you could prepare for a discussion to initiate the conversation, reviewing potentially, review our current policies, pros and cons of a potential cell phone ban, and just what that might look like.
The current policy in both Unit 5 and District 87 leaves decisions up to individual teachers or building administrators. Some confiscate them temporarily, some bargain with kids to use them only in the last few minutes of class, some just live with the phones. DeHaye says Unit 5 should look at the landscape of policies.
As we see in the news, there are a lot of school districts locally, statewide, and across the country that are implementing cell phone bans.
One of those is the Los Angeles School District, which acted last spring. Peoria District 150 requires phones to be off and in a locker. Decatur schools will start banning them when kids come back next month. Arguments for cell phone bans generally center on eliminating distractions and curbing toxic social media exchanges during school hours, which can boil over into classroom disruptions. Arguments against cell phone limits include public safety, potential need for parents to connect with their kids, and the idea bans don't help teach kids responsible use of social media. DeHaye says it's the start of a dialogue on the subject.
Just so we as a board can understand what would be the best steps forward for the students in our district.
Administrators have put it on the list of things to study. It'll be several months before they get back to the board, and there's no firm deadline. Right now, they're in the glide path toward the start of the school year, a start that for now still includes phones in many places at school. I'm Charlie Schlenker.
Here's some other stories we're following in the WGLT newsroom. Military records show that a former Sangamon County Sheriff's deputy now charged with murder in the fatal shooting of Sonia Massey was previously discharged from the U.S. Army for serious misconduct. The Bloomington Fire Department will soon use a new fire safety simulator to prevent future emergencies. It's a mobile trailer with indoor and outdoor stations that can teach residents how to stay safe. It should be up and running around this time next year. You can find more on these stories at WGLT.org. There have been a lot of tornadoes in Illinois this year. The National Weather Service says that the Chicago and Rockford areas alone saw 27 tornadoes touch down one day last week. That brings the statewide total to over 100 this year, already surpassing the annual average of 50. In this interview with WBEZ's Mel Ballara, state climatologist Trent Ford explains the implications of that staggering number.
When we get a lot of tornadoes in any given year, we tend to get a larger scale environmental setup. I'm talking large scale like continental scale, weather environment setup where we get northwest flow, so air moving over a big ridge in the western U.S., moving from northwest to southeast across the Midwest, combined with really strong southerly flow from the Gulf of Mexico. And so bringing us kind of humid, warm air from the Gulf of Mexico. And when that cooler air from the northwest hits that warmer, more humid air from the Gulf of Mexico, we get that clash of air masses, and that can create the kind of conditions that are conducive to not just creating one storm with one tornado, but multiple rounds of storms with many tornadoes.
What does the forecast look like? Could we be seeing more tornadoes this year, or are we now in the clear?
Yeah, it's a good question. When we look at kind of the climatological frequency of tornadoes, we see the peak frequency between April and June, and that really falls off in the fall. In fact, the fewest tornadoes occur in September and October. We'll have to see what comes of that. August overall, the outlooks are showing a dry pattern for much of the central U.S., but it's really about, again, those two pressure systems. What's going on in the western U.S., what's going on with the Bermuda High off the coast of the southeast and the Atlantic. And so what that means is that for August and maybe into September, we could have the potential to see that kind of large-scale setup like what we saw in July. It's likely not going to be as persistent. So the chances, perhaps, if we want to put it in kind of probability terms, of getting that kind of big storm, big tornado outbreak like what we saw last week may not be as large as it was in July, because we may not get the persistence day after day after day, but the potential is still there.
We do hear a lot about climate change causing more frequent extreme weather events. What role do you think climate change plays when it comes specifically to tornadoes?
Yeah, that connection is not as strong, or we don't have it as much information highlighting that connection between climate change and tornadoes or hail or those kind of isolated severe weather types of events as there is with something like climate change and extreme heat. That being said, there is a lot. I mean, the research over the last 10 years has advanced so far, and mainly that's advancements in modeling and computing, where we can start to resolve some of these features of these storms that happen not at the large scale, like what I was just talking about, but at finer scales, maybe within the Chicagoland region. And so some of that research is suggesting that there may be a connection between climate change, especially into the future, and the frequency of tornado events. Especially the frequency of those environments that I just talked about that are conducive to producing many tornadoes, like what we saw last week.
Are we going to see developed areas actually seeing more tornadoes?
Yeah, first let me dispel the rumor that tornadoes can occur in big cities. We saw 27 tornadoes, including I think something like 8 or 10 in Chicago proper. Everybody is vulnerable to tornadoes. Tornadoes can occur anywhere in Illinois, so we'll just dispel that right off the bat. One of the issues is that irrespective of what happens with changing frequency of tornadoes and the connection with climate change, we know our urban and developed spaces are getting geographically larger. The Chicagoland region is expanding, but even down here in Champaign-Urbana, we're expanding. So what that means is that if a tornado sets down today in the state of Illinois or in the Chicagoland region, it has a much higher likelihood of running into something or someone than it did 50 or 60 years ago. And so what that means is that, again, irrespective of what happens with climate change and tornado frequency, we need to be making sure that we're not manufacturing vulnerability by the way we're developing our urban and our lived spaces.
That's state climatologist Trent Ford speaking with WBEZ's Melba Lara. And before we let you go, the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council will host another installment of BN by the Numbers today at 11:30 at ISU's Alumni Center. That's it for today. I'm Ryan Denham, and the show is produced by Rosalie Truback. You can subscribe to The Leadoff on the NPR app or wherever you get your podcasts.